lost the championship, I reckon, in the first 4 races. And as much as anything else because of lack of reliability of the Williams compared with the McLaren. And it seems to me that the name of the game in 1992 is going to be reliability, because every point is going to count.
Certainly the Williams team at the time to run their automatic gearbox, their semi-automatic gearbox, they justified that retrospectively on the grounds that there was no other way to run the car, because that was an integral part of the car and it would have been a totally new design. But the problems largely, as I understand it, came from the electronics of the gearbox, which is the difficult bit of it. There's no reason why they couldn't run it as a manual to start off with, as Jordan, I believe, are doing this year. They've got a motorcycle-style gearbox, and all they'll have to do is sort the mechanicals out, which is the easy bit, and then put the brain on, which they can fiddle around with for as long as they like.
Well, as of now, it looks as though both Williams and McLaren are going to have at least the first 3 races with developments of the 1991 car as opposed to their new 1992 cars, in which case we should see McLaren and Williams much more competitive with each other, and in particular Mansell and Senna much more competitive with each other.
My gut feeling is that the overall package of McLaren and Williams towards the end of last season, once McLaren had caught up the big gap, or reduced the big gap of performance that Williams managed to get over them in mid-season, round about July and August. Really, the McLaren was not as good a car, probably, but by the end of the season they were just about competitive, and Senna was there to make the difference. And I think that would probably be the same. And it is my opinion that McLaren, which is bad news for Williams and for Mansell, have much more room for improvement in their last year's arrangements than Williams do. For example, if we take bits and pieces at a time, first of all, the engine. Renault, of course, have been developing that engine for a very long time. They developed it for 2 or 3 years before the Formula even started, right? And they've run it all the time. Whereas Honda, their V12 is only 1 season old, plus a little bit of development time before, which, well, in the normal stage means, you know, development reduces, your improvement reduces and reduces and reduces through the life of a project. But it brings me to one other thing. You said that you see that Williams really lost the championship in the first 4 races, and certainly they gave McLaren a big start. But McLaren had luck during those 4 races, because I think in at least 3 of them that they won, they had mechanical trouble that could easily have put them out of the race. And so there was they were a bit marginal. But at the end of the day, Williams were still set to win the championship when Mansell threw it off the road in Japan for no reason. Now, one of the problems is that I can see a scenario where they can arrive at the climax of the championship in better shape than in 91, where they were always chasing from behind, Williams I'm talking about. But Mansell has now thrown 3 championships away that he should have won. And last year, he could not have had a bigger car advantage. I mean, that's the sort of car advantage that people dream about, that he had in the Williams for a lot of the season. And he still, at the end of the day, chucked it away. And the worry is that even if the team gets it all together, because they made mistakes too, whether Mansell can stand up under pressure. You know, I hope and believe that he can learn from all this and come with a different approach. He's gone to Florida to live there. Maybe things will change.
Well,
but
yeah, I'll tell you this. I spent the whole day with him very, very recently, since he's come back from Florida, and as you rightly point out, he went over there to be able to train in the winter. He's lost weight, and he seems to me to be a more relaxed, a calmer, a more mature Nigel
all should
Mansell.
be good for him.
Yeah, and who is very conscious of what the situation is. He's 38 years old now. He can't have all that many years left in his Grand Prix career. And I honestly think that if Mansell continues to have the mental attitude that he's got now, and that Williams have managed to close the gap and make the wheel nuts stay on and all that sort of thing, that the season is going to come down between Senna and Mansell again. But what we haven't done is look at what else is up against McLaren. I mean, for instance, Ferrari, no Prost, but they've got Alesi and they've got Capelli. How would you see that scenario developing?
Well, I think Alesi is certainly capable of winning Grand Prix. Capelli, for me, has never proven himself, but at the same time, I haven't seen enough of Capelli in the right sort of car to say that he's not capable. I'm not saying he's not, I'm just saying that I don't know that he is. But Alesi certainly is. The problem I see at Ferrari, though, is that they are really restructuring. I mean, Luca Montezemolo they have finally had the sense to bring him in and give him total control, right? So at least they've got one person running the ship instead of a whole bunch of people fighting each other and all reporting to Fiat and all sneaking on the other person and trying to spend more energy, stabbing each other in the back to secure their positions than they are to get the team to win races.
Luca
Montezemolo has been, I gather, given a carte blanche. He is restructuring, but he himself, because I've spoken to him during the winter, is not expecting quick results because the teams these days, particularly Ferrari, are too big and unwieldy. You cannot turn a team like that round overnight. There is too much rubbish, too many difficulties, too many feuds to be broken up and reconstituted for them to do it quickly, as well as building a competitive car. They've got a big weakness with their engine. Their engine is not as good as the Renault and the Honda. Get a reasonable chassis. There's no reason why they couldn't win the odd race.
Now there's two jokers in the pack that I am desperately hoping, from the point of view of an interesting Grand Prix scene, are going to come good, and they are Benetton and Jordan. And if you look at Benetton, first of all, they've got one of the greatest new talents in Grand Prix racing I've seen for a long, long time in Michael Schumacher, backed up by a man who's got to make his reputation come good this year, and that's Martin Brundle, if he's to continue. They've got all the acumen and drive of Tom Walkinshaw. They've got the Ford engine, and most importantly, they've got Goodyear tyres, which are going to make a big difference to them this year.
Yes, and I mean, you're absolutely right about the Benetton driver combination. Funny enough, I think it's the best thing in his career that could have happened to Martin Brundle, because he has been knocking on the door for a long time. He has quite rightly been saying, and other people have observed, he's never been given a fair chance in a good car. He showed he was a great Formula 3 driver, but since then he hasn't really had a chance to show his talent. To have Schumacher alongside him, who is undoubtedly a tremendous talent, is the perfect opportunity, because if Brundle can put himself in front of Schumacher, he won't put himself in front by much, because there's no doubt Schumacher is very, very good, right? But he should do. If he can do that, even by a couple of tenths, but reasonably consistently, finish and qualify just in front of him, then we know that Brundle has been wronged all this time, because we know Schumacher is definitely good.
Now, if you look at the Jordan team, I think it's a bit the other way, because I think Gary Anderson last year produced a car which was a potential winner out of the box. This year he has refined that car. This year he's got the Yamaha engine, and Yamaha are determined to beat Honda, and we know they can do it in the motorcycle world, and I don't see why they shouldn't be able to do it in the car world. So there's a car there, there's the engine there. Now, is the Achilles heel of the Jordan team going to be the quality of the drivers? I am not personally convinced, after last season, that Modena is all that he was cracked up to be in my eyes in 1990, and Mauricio Gugelmin is certainly not an ace. Have they got it?
I quite agree with you. To deal with Gugelmin first, because he's easy to dismiss, and I'm afraid that's the best I can do for him. He's not, as you say, he's not an ace. He's not really, in my opinion, even real Formula One material, but to be fair, he is bringing funds to the team, so he is.
Yeah, and he's a lot better than some of them are in it.
Exactly, bringing money, and he's competent. And a team like Jordan doesn't need somebody involving them in a lot of expense with damaged machinery and that sort of thing. They want somebody who they know can bring the car home at the end of a race and will pick up the money and the points that's necessary. So from that point of view, Gugelmin, they could have done a lot worse, but he won't set the world on fire. Modena is a much more difficult kettle of fish, because I saw Modena through the best period of his career, which is when he won the Formula 3000 championship, and since then, and when he first came into Formula 1 in Brabham, and he was very impressive indeed. Since then he hasn't been impressive, but he's not been in very good cars, and it's difficult to impress in a bad car for anybody. It doesn't matter who you are. That's the first point.
I'll drink
and Eddie Jordan, for whom I've got a lot of respect for understanding drivers, more so probably than anybody else running a Formula One team. He's got faith, and that's a fairly good pointer for me.
I think too that with luck there are going to be two other names that are going to be crossing your lips and mine a lot more in 92 than they did last year. One is Ligier and the other is Lotus, because it actually seems conceivable that after all these years of gigantic expenditure and no success, Ligier could be closer to the front. I say could be closer to the front because they've got the Renault engine and they've got Alain Prost. Now, all right, I know Alain Prost is there by default because he lost his place in Ferrari because of the Saturnine Mr. Senna. But the fact is that Prost and Ligier with the Renault engine could be a force for 92. But here is the Murray Walker James Hunt challenge, which I think we should both give an answer to. Do you see McLaren winning races in 1992?
I do.
Yes or no? Yeah.
Yes.
So do I. Do you see Williams winning races in 1992?
Yes.
So do I. Do you see Ferrari winning races in 92?
Probably. The odd one. Possibly.
Yes,
Let's say possibly.
I don't know which is the stronger, probable or possible.
I think let's say possibly, which is to me not as strong as probably.
Well, I'll go with that too.
Even money to win one.
Do you see Benetton winning one or more Grand Prix?
I'd give them a chance at one.
And who in your view, I know all the caveats, who do you think will be Grand Prix, who will be world champion in 1992?
Well, the intellectual evidence all points to Senna. However, stranger things happen, and the other thing is that if Mansell finally comes of age and gets rid of his choking problems towards the end of the season, he is well equipped to win the World Championship now. He's entirely mature, and when there's no sight of the World Championship around for Mansell, he drives like a world champion, right? It's only when he can see the finish line that he stops driving like a world champion. And if he can just cure that, and he's good enough, he should be confident enough in everything else to be able to forget the championship and just drive. And if he can just make himself do that, he can win it.
Well, speaking for I myself personally, to coin a phrase, wishes father to the thought, I have been accused of being the chairman of the Nigel Mansell fan club, and I think Nigel has got a better chance of becoming world champion this year than he's ever had.
これ降りた時ですね、メキシコグランプリロドリゲスサーキット。
これの VTR 見たくないですね、もう。
そうですよね、本人としてはちょっとかっこ悪いかもしれないですけど、本当に体調崩してたしね、海抜 2300m ぐらいあるところで酸素も薄いし、慣れなきゃたまんない世界だと思うんですけどね。蘇ってくるんじゃないですか、この時の苦しさが。
これ見るためにまだ胃が痛くなる、こう条件反射で痛くなっちゃうんですよね。これ見てて本当に印象的でしたよね、映像は。
カメラっていうのはここまで入っちゃいますからね。
さて、アンドレア・モーダが出走したことにより今シーズン初めてのプレコーリファイが行われました。注目の片山右京ですが4番手、
初めての国、そしてまた初めてのコース、ブラジル。片山はですね、賀賞の 1.1 秒値で PQ4 位通過しました。
昨シーズンはジョーダンで予備予選を経験済みの賀賞、トップで通過です。フットワークとフォンドメタルは1台ずつが予備予選出場を課せられましたが、アルボレート、チェザとも通過しています。
昨年フォンドメタルチームはワンカーエントリー、今年から2台に増えたということで、その増えた分の1台だけが PQ 義務付けになったわけですね。ですからフットワークチームはですね、その分1台が昇格する形になりまして、1台分は PQ 義務付け、それがアルボレートになったわけです。
ようやく出走できましたアンドレア・モーダ。ドライバーはロベルト・モレノと新人のペリー・マッカーシーだったんですが、
モレノは3ラップしただけで、トラブルで止まってしまいました。そしてこの人ペリー・マッカーシーはスーパーライセンスの問題がありまして出走できませんでした。
Mas tinha brasileiro na pista. Roberto Pulvo Moreno com a Andrea Moda número 34. Ele disputava uma das 4 vagas nos treinos oficiais contra os carros da La Russe, Fondi Metal e Footwork. Moreno teve problemas durante a prova e parou nos boxes para tentar resolver. Os técnicos da Andrea Moda, apreensivos, não conseguiram muita coisa. E o melhor tempo do brasileiro foi 1 minuto, 38 segundos, 569. Com esse tempo, Roberto Pupo Moreno não conseguiu a classificação para os treinos oficiais. E não é desta vez que a equipe Andrea Moda estreia em um grande prêmio de Fórmula 1.
Aanwezig nu met Roberto Moreno achter het stuur. Auto kende versnellingsbakproblemen in de voorkwalificaties. Voorkwalificaties die we dit keer weer tegenkwamen in de Formule 1, de vroege training. Sassetti hier, de teambaas, ziet het gelaten aan hoe Roberto Moreno die Caffi en Bertaglia vervangt. In de auto zit en met versnellingsbakproblemen terug wordt geschoven in de pits. Terwijl de voorkwalificaties in volle gang zijn. Ze hebben er ook een Engelsman bij het team, Perry McCarthy. Man zit klaar in de auto, maar zal uiteindelijk geen superlicentie ontvangen. Perry McCarthy dus niet snel genoeg bevonden, heeft niet genoeg resultaten behaald om in een Formule 1 race van start te mogen gaan. En hier dan weer de pogingen van de monteurs om de Moda Jet op het circuit te krijgen. Veel problemen. In eerste instantie werden de auto's afgekeurd bij de crashtest. Toen moesten ze de $100.000 inschrijfgeld nog betalen. En dit is Per McCarthy. Waarschijnlijk de eerste en de laatste beelden in een Formule 1 wagen van deze man. Geen superlicentie, geen superlicentie. Werd hem verstrekt door Roland Bruinzerade. En hij is hier in gesprek met iemand die ook achter in het veld rijdt op dit moment. Aan de rechterkant zien we Erik van der Poelen.
Pois não, no seu primeiro grande prêmio do Brasil, Christian Fittipaldi enfrenta sérios problemas. Ele conseguiu acertar o motor, mas agora apareceram dificuldades, falhas na suspensão. Aqui está ao meu lado o Fernando Paiva, que é um dos engenheiros da Minardi. Fernando, o que acontece com a suspensão do Christian Fittipaldi, no carro dele?
Nós estamos com um problema que o carro sai muito de traseira e nós só estamos esperando que isso não comprometa o consumo dos pneus. Se fizer só uma parada de pneu e terminar a corrida, ainda tem chance de fazer alguma coisa, de chegar aí entre os 10 que não terminou ainda nenhuma corrida, era bom fazer isso.
Vocês não parecem muito otimistas, né?
Não, nós estamos otimistas quanto a terminar a corrida, mas o carro não está andando aquilo que andou nas duas primeiras corridas para poder prometer um ponto, uma coisa assim. Só se realmente terminar a corrida e pouca gente terminar.
Certo, muito obrigado.
A couple of days after the Mexican Grand Prix, England and Pakistan took to the field in Melbourne for the Cricket World Cup final. By the way, one thing I hadn't quite appreciated when making my last video was just how controversial the South Africa v England semi-final had been, as someone who doesn't really follow cricket and certainly didn't in 1992. The rain that interrupted play in the semi-final came when South Africa needed a very achievable 22 runs off 13 balls, but the shower meant 2 overs were lost. At the time, the arcane mathematical formula for working out scores in situations like this was the most productive overs method, which meant that South Africa now needed 22 runs off 1 ball, which was very unlikely to say the least. When things were recalculated in 2006 by the newer Duckworth-Lewis method, which is still used, they would have needed 12 instead, which was a little more doable if still a big ask. Thank you there to viewer LJW1912 who'd clued me in to go and have a look at that again. Anyway, it was Pakistan's first World Cup final and England's third and second in a row, and while England were favourites, neither had ever actually won the title. Pakistan batted first but lost their opening batsman for relatively few runs before captain Imran Khan steadied the ship, and they ended their innings with 249. An achievable target, but things started badly when England's talisman Ian Botham went for a duck, followed by his replacement Alex Stewart for just 21. Neil Fairbrother contributed 62, but England just ran out of balls and Pakistan took the trophy, a huge moment for a cricket-mad country that had undergone so much in recent years, not to mention the large Pakistani diaspora living in the UK. It was election season in Britain as well as America, with a poll called for the 9th of April. The opposition Labour Party were gaining in the polls, but it was clear that it was going to be close, and many were predicting a hung parliament, where neither main party got enough seats for an outright majority. On the 1st of April, Labour held a final rally in Sheffield with the kind of dramatic triumphalism more commonly seen in the US. Neil Kinnock's cry of became famous, not to say infamous, and many confessed themselves a bit put off by the spectacle. How much of a difference it would make on polling day remained to be seen. The USS Missouri, the last serving battleship in the world, was finally retired from service. Laid down in 1941 and launched in 1944, Missouri took part in the latter stages of the war in the Pacific, and it was on her quarterdeck that Japan's surrender was signed. With the military use of big gun battleships declining, she was mothballed in 1955, but reactivated in 1984 as Ronald Reagan ramped up the size of the Navy, upgraded with launchers for cruise missiles. In 1991, she took part in Operation Desert Storm, using her massive 16-inch naval guns to provide fire support, as well as being the setting for Cher's 1989 music video If I Could Turn Back Time, shot while she was in dry dock. And on the day of the Brazilian Grand Prix, Bosnia and Herzegovina declared its independence from Yugoslavia, following its referendum a couple of weeks earlier. The new country's independence was recognised just 2 days later by both the EC and the USA, but by then Bosnian Serb militias armed and equipped by Yugoslavia had already besieged the capital of Sarajevo. And so the eyes of the racing world turned to Brazil, where local hero Ayrton Senna was the talk of the town as usual. After 2 races of total Williams domination, and being relegated to the third row of the grid in Mexico, Senna had prevailed upon Ron Dennis to rush the new MP47A car into use for his home race. Test drivers Blundell, Palmer and McNish had had their days off cancelled and put in the hours to finish the car off, and hedging their bets, the team brought 3 MP47As and 3 MP46s to Sao Paulo to give Ayrton his best chance of doing well on home tarmac. The new car boasted a 6-speed semi-automatic gearbox, a brand new Honda V12 that was lighter and more compact, and a new fly-by-wire throttle. Senna had driven it at Silverstone but was still unhappy with it. "It's a horror," he said. "The only thing that works is the gearbox." Things were getting a bit fractious over at Team Perfect. Nigel Mansell, by contrast, looked fitter and more relaxed than ever, swanning in from his new Florida home after spending the intervening weeks playing golf. Patrese too had had a holiday but seemed a little bit more on edge, less comfortable with the gizmo-laden Williams and increasingly conscious of falling behind Mansell. The local fans were all here to see Senna, of course, but rookie Christian Fittipaldi was also getting a lot of attention. His illustrious uncle Emerson was Brazil's first F1 hero after all, and although he couldn't be there because he was busy with IndyCar, Dad Wilson and Mum Susie were very much in evidence, trying to take the media spotlight off young Christian in his first home appearance. There was a 4th Brazilian in the paddock too, along with Senna, Fittipaldi and Maurizio Gugelmin, because in the aftermath of the Mexican Grand Prix both Alex Caffi and Enrico Battaglia had either, depending on which account you read, quit Andrea Moda in disgust or been fired after criticising the team. Either way, Andrea Sassetti needed 2 new drivers, one of whom was popular Brazilian Roberto Moreno, now joining his 8th team and who, seeing which way the wind was blowing, got his fee up front. The other driver was almost complete unknown Brit Perry McCarthy, but there'd been a bit of a misunderstanding. Again, depending on which version you read, he'd either misunderstood a fax saying he was cleared to apply for a super licence as him actually having been granted one, or he had one which was then withdrawn on a technicality. In any case, he wouldn't be driving in Brazil. I mean, he wouldn't have been driving anyway because Andrea Moda only actually had one working car with them. Car number 34, Roberto Moreno. The ever-cheerful Roberto certainly had a roller-coaster 1991, having a decent if unspectacular season as Piquet's number 2 at Benetton before being summarily dumped in favour of Michael Schumacher and appearing for both Jordan and Minardi before the season was out. He's a popular figure in the paddock, but there's a sense that Benetton was his big chance and he's just never made the most of it. The new Andrea Moda car is unlikely to be much to write home about either, but if it does have any potential, Roberto will find it. But with Andrea Moda finally able to enter one car at least, pre-qualifying was back on, even if only one car would be eliminated. Another Brazilian was in evidence in the paddock too, as recent retiree Nelson Piquet was seen hanging around the Ferrari garage. Hanging out with his friends Niki Lauda and Jean Alesi, he said, but already the unfortunate Ivan Capelli was subject to rumours that he would soon be dumped by Ferrari in favour of Piquet. Christian Fittipaldi would have a new engine too. Lamborghini had produced a new version of its V12 for both Minardi and LaRousse, and indeed appeared to actually be taking F1 more seriously, with Mike Royce seconded from parent company Chrysler to take over as technical director, and talk of a brand new engine to replace the 1989 vintage 3512. Last year's Lamborghini users Ligier had done intensive testing at Le Castellet to figure out what was wrong with the JS37, and a few tweaks by Frank Durney had improved things a little, which had pleased Comas, but Boutsen was still finding it lacking grip. Things were getting fractious in the Ligier camp too, with the drivers having fallen out amongst themselves, both fallen out with Guy Ligier over the whole Prost saga, and Comas was reportedly not getting on with Gerard Ducarouge either. Lotus announced that they had brought in team old boy John Miles to help the development of the new car, and Guy Edwards was hired to bring in sponsors. A former driver, he was one of the 4 who pulled Niki Lauda from his burning Ferrari in 1976, for which he won the Queen's Gallantry Medal, Guy Edwards had become legendary for cutting sponsorship deals, beginning with the infamous deal for bringing Penthouse magazine to his own drive with Hesketh in 1976, as well as bringing Rothmans, ICI and Silk Cut into F1 at various stages. And so 5 drivers got ready for an early Friday morning start for pre-qualifying. Roberto Moreno in the Andrea Moda, both LaRousse cars, and 1 each from the Fon-Matal and Footwork teams. Aguri Suzuki was originally down to do the latter, but his teammate Michele Alboreto generously volunteered after seeing Aguri's downcast expression. With only 1 car to eliminate, Albo wasn't taking too much of a risk, and indeed with Moreno's S291 still being put together 20 minutes before the session, and taking to the track with tape still holding some bits together, it wasn't a huge surprise when his gearbox gave up after 2 laps, leaving Moreno 16.5 seconds off the pace. The rest were pretty close, with just 1.1 seconds, covering Gasho, Alboreto, Chiesa and Katayama. On to the main qualifying session then, and Senna and Berger took to the track in the new MP47A, only for it to be very obvious that it wasn't ready to race. During the course of the 2 days of qualifying, the drivers swapped from new to old car and back again as one technical problem after another needed fixing.
just about set for the start. Here's David Hobbs.
And there's Rebs right up now, foot trembling on the clutch, and he's making a very good start. Some smoke off the tyres there, making great starts. And there's slipping back out of the picture there on the right-hand side. And as they approach the first chicane, the front row still side by side, but into second place as they go to there, stream out of that, down towards that very, very fast curve at the far end of the circuit, which is so dangerous and so fast. And there he's still in the lead. There we see still running pretty smoothly here. They scream through that, glued on pretty well behind him. And as you can see, the whole thing curves, which of course is a bit tricky when you're doing 180 miles an hour, because it doesn't give you a very long field of vision to start off. Again through that curve. Just look at those. We see still running pretty smoothly here. They scream through that, glued on pretty well behind him. As you can see, the whole thing curves, which of course is a bit tricky when you're doing 180 miles an hour, because it doesn't give you a very long field of vision to start off. Again through that curve. Just look at those cars, just like slot cars. I suppose giving the curve 2 or 3 feet to spare.
How much downforce on those cars in that off curve, David?
Well, that sort of speed. My, he really outbraked that, comes off that corner really fast as they scream through that front of probably 80 or 90,000. There we see still running pretty smoothly here. They scream through that, glued on pretty well behind him. As you can see, the whole thing curves, which of course is a bit tricky when you're doing There we see still running pretty smoothly here as they scream through that, glued on pretty well behind him, and as you can see. We see still running pretty smoothly here as they scream through that, glued on pretty well behind him, and as you can see the whole thing curves, which of course is a bit tricky when you're doing 180 miles an hour because it doesn't give you a very long field of vision to start off. Again through that curve, just look at those. there we see still running pretty smoothly here as they scream through that, glued on pretty well behind him. As you can see, the whole thing curves, which of course is a bit tricky when you're doing... fast in there, David? Well, they're going probably close to 100 miles an hour, and they were put into slow.
Most drivers consider luck to be a major part of motorsport. Jabouille says it has nothing to do with luck in racing. He says it all is based on problems.
Well, that's certainly a very philosophical outlook, but of course it just depends how lucky you are when those technical problems strike. And for instance, when I called that pretty damned unlucky at the time.
Who was driving, you or him?
Him. Well, who else?
Of course. Most drivers consider
that's going to knock quite a bit of time off him now, because obviously I don't know what he's done, but whatever he's done, he did it wrong as they disappeared down that very fast straight into the first chicane.
Falling all the way back, continuing.
There we see still running pretty smoothly here as they scream through that, glued on pretty well behind him. And as you can see, the whole thing curves, which of course is a bit tricky. cars doing there, David? Well, they're going probably close to 100 miles an hour, and they were...
pit area here at the Grand Prix. You're watching the young driver who's...
That's going to knock quite a bit of time off him now. Of course, obviously wants to get by that guy, because once he's through, he'll pick up quite a bit of time, and he really needs to get by to make some time off. He's now running about 6 seconds in front of him. we see still running pretty smoothly here as they scream through that, glued on pretty well behind him. And as you can quite a bit of time off him now. Of course, obviously wants to get by that guy, because once he's through, he'll pick up quite a bit of time, and he really needs to get by to make some time off. He's now running about 6 seconds in front of him.
In the pit area here at the Grand Prix, you're watching the young driver who's having trouble with the car.
Well, I don't know what the trouble was. They had the ring off that car. I did see a lot of dust kicked up just a few moments ago. It may have been damage to the car, or it may be looking at the gearbox. obviously wants to get by that guy, because once he's through, he'll pick up quite a bit of time, and he really needs to get by to make some time off. He's now running about 6 seconds in front of him. That's going to knock quite a bit of time off him. Now, of course, obviously wants to get by that guy, because once he's through, he'll pick up quite a bit of time, and he really needs to get by to make some time off. He's now running about... We see still running pretty... Look at that jostling for 4th and 5th position there. Look at that jostling for 4th and 5th position there. Quite a bit of time off him now, of course. Obviously wants to get by that guy, because once he's through, he'll pick up quite a bit of time, and he really...
In the pit area here at the Grand Prix, you're watching the young driver who's having trouble with the car.
That's going to knock quite a bit of time off him now, of course. Obviously wants to get by that guy, because once he's through, he'll pick up quite a bit of time, and he really needs to get by to make some time off. He's now running... we see still running pretty smooth. off him. Now, of course, obviously wants to get by that guy, because once he's through, he'll pick up quite a bit of time, and he really needs to get by to make some time off. He's now running about 6 seconds in front of him. time bar after 10 years for saying that.
He comes down, coming up to take the checkered flag, and the win in today's Grand Prix.
Cabrini. Christian, que balanço você faz dessa sua primeira participação no GP do Brasil?
Apesar do carro não ter tido muito ótimo o fim de semana inteiro, na corrida eu estava com muito problema de motor no começo, o carro trabalhava só em 10 cilindros, foi por isso que de repente eu perdi umas 5, 6 posições, daí ele começou a melhorar na metade da corrida, principalmente na hora que eu troquei de pneu. E, enfim, se não desse problema ia dar para terminar entre os 8 e 7 primeiros, né? Que seria, apesar de tudo que a gente teve esse fim de semana, um bom resultado, ó.
Christian Fittipaldi, então, abandonando com problemas mecânicos. A voz triste do Christian, o que é natural.
danger to their lead, the Williamses cruised to their third 1-2 in a row, with Michael Schumacher third to make it an identical podium to Mexico, with Alesi and Capelli fourth and fifth to finally put some points on the board for Ferrari, and Michele Alboreto taking his first point since coming third for Tyrrell in Mexico 1989, and Footwork's first ever point as a constructor, or possibly their first since Monaco 1990 when they were called Arrows. Morbidelli, Leto, Katayama and Hakkinen were the remaining finishers, the Lotus 4 laps down after its gearbox woes but gamely still plugging away, and then the recriminations could begin. Senna had slipped out the back door, leaving behind a cassette tape with some remarks to the effect that McLaren needed to get their car sorted out by Spain or they could forget either title this year. Schumacher, not knowing about Ayrton's electrical problems, criticised him for playing games of braking and accelerating in front of him, brave thing to say in Brazil. Martin Brundle accused Alesi of weaving around in front of him as if it was a Formula Ford race. Jean, for his part, criticised both car and engine, despite them actually going quite well, while Gerard Ducarouge probably spoke for all at the cars were actually doing well, they had a stupid accident instead. The all-conquering Williams team, Riccardo Patrese was unhappy if philosophical at the news given to him by team manager Peter Winter that the decision to bring him in second for tyres, the thing that Patrese felt cost him the race win, had been a tactical decision on the part of the team. There were no team orders at Williams, they said, but clearly one driver was more equal than the other. So, 3 wins for Mansell and 3 second places for Patrese put those two at the top of the table, with Schumacher third and Alesi inserting himself into the table 6th behind the 2 McLaren drivers, who didn't score, so Berger got to relish being ahead of Senna in the table just that little bit longer. Maximum points for Williams too, with Benetton moving up into second place now, 2 points ahead of McLaren. There was now a month to go until the first of the European races at Barcelona. Benetton, Minardi and Lotus were all hoping to introduce new cars in Spain, McLaren would be working flat out to get theirs in racing order, and there were plenty of other teams who would have a lot to do between now and then. There was even the possibility that Andrea Moda would have 2 working cars and 2 licensed drivers by then.
Let's take a quiet look at the weather, shall we? Friday night, countrywide, some inland parts of England and Wales will see the cloud breaking on Saturday to give spells of warm sunshine. Western coasts will remain damp and misty with rain over Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northwest England during the day. The far north will be bright but windy with a few showers. Easter Day will be broadly similar, but with the main area of rain moving north through Scotland. On Easter Monday, the rain will continue its northwards passage. Many western districts will become less misty as showers move in from the Atlantic. Some southeastern districts will be dry and warm for much of the day. And that's the weather forecast for tomorrow, taking the time now on BBC One to 18 minutes past 1. And that's it from us tonight. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Join us again tomorrow, won't you, please? There's plenty of entertainment left and information with it on offer from BBC Radios 1 and 2, and if you actually happen to catch Radio 4's long-wave transmitter, then you'll be listening to the World Service of the BBC from Bush House. But from us here on BBC One, this is Mark Devlin on behalf of us all, wishing you a very good night.